everyone, my name is Ana Fuentes, and this is my first video blog for American immigration and social justice. I have taken a couple of Chicano studies courses in the past. I took racial identity formation with Dr. Montelongo. So I had a little bit of knowledge regarding the history of immigration, specifically within the 19th and 20th century. But still going through the readings and the documentaries and the podcasts is still really interesting to see the ways in which the label of immigrant was created, both culturally, socially, politically, and legally to determine who is allowed to stay here, who is allowed to work here, and under what conditions. Another thing that I think is really interesting, drawing from my knowledge of race identity formation, is how different racial scripts have been applied and reapplied to marginalized groups throughout American history, depending on whether or not we needed them for labor. So, for example, we would ban the Chinese from working here with the Chinese Exclusion Act. I'm sorry, but they are also um, responsible for the development of the railroad in California. And, we have historically erased that part of our history, erasing the contributions that the Chinese immigrants made to American culture and society, similarly to the way that we exploited Mexican labor through the Bracero program. And once that was no longer economically feasible or reasonable, then we reapplied this label of Mexican immigrants stealing our jobs. We have to send them back home, etc. Another thing that I want to highlight from the readings that I think is really interesting is that in both cases, both cases of the Chinese migrating to the U.S. and Mexicans migrating to the U.S. for labor, in both instances, women were not permitted. Women were not taken into account into what it means to be an immigrant in the United States. Therefore, the landscape of the immigrant looked very different, and I think this was very much done so to avoid developing family units here, and again, just treating these immigrants as birds of passage, or like just a cycling form of employment rather than something stable. And moving on to the impossible subjects reading, something that I want to highlight from that reading that I thought was really interesting is the author's brief discussion, but nonetheless important, of the myth of immigrant America, and how this myth derives its power from the part it creates in enabling American exceptionalism. So what I take this to believe is that we have this collective idea of the United States as an immigrant country, and although, that is true, because other than Native Americans, everyone else should be considered an immigrant in my eyes. We don't really do that a good job at integrating those cultures and becoming one cohesive culture. But we do a great job at creating the idea that we do. So the myth of immigrant America is created, and we feel like, oh, America is great because of its immigrants, thus enabling the American exceptionalism that the author was talking about in Impossible Subjects. And I think this also justifies the use of violence in the border, because we see immigrants as a threat to our sovereignty, which, brings me to current problems of immigration, in which we see asylum seekers who are escaping from their country and asking for their application to be viewed, which is perfectly legal. Yet we are criminalizing these individuals, and we're detaining these individuals. And again, it is because this migrant label has been constructed in a way that um, simply by crossing the border that is a crime. So therefore, immigrants are criminals, and they were willing to commit this one crime of crossing the border. Therefore, people assume that they will be willing to commit all other sorts of crimes. But in reality, we only accept immigration when it's beneficial, economically beneficial to us. Therefore, when we can exploit these workers. But when it comes to people from the same country, from Mexico, specifically Mexico, because I know that Mexicans have a specifically hard time getting asylum from the US, then when it's convenient for us, we reject them and we send them back to terrible working conditions, social conditions that in their home countries that realistically the United States has taken a huge part in creating. So I guess that's about it for my reaction for this module's readings. I look forward to watching all of your videos and listening to any feedback that I could get because I was really nervous. I don't know how well, if I did this correctly. Hope I did. And well, yeah, have a good day, guys.